Morning, everybody. My name's Linda Hailey, as you've probably heard. I thought I might start by actually explaining who I am and why I'm here. So I am best known as a small business marketing guru. I like to say I'm a marketing guru with a bit of a difference. I'm a marketing guru who has absolutely no formal qualifications in marketing or anything else, which is going to make half of you really, really relieved and the other half, really, really nervous. I specialise in down-to-earth practical stuff for small business. So even though I come from Sydney, I'm not going to be talking about you need to spend megabucks on things. My background is I started off purely doing small business consulting back in the 90s, when in those days the assumption was whatever worked for a large business, so corporations, would actually work for small business. We now know that that is not true. That in actual fact, some of the concepts that are applied to big business, such as the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, if 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients, you focus on those 20%, great if you're Colgate-Palmolive, absolute death if you're a consultant and you've only got 4 clients. So I developed a lot of concepts around how to work with small business. Then, of course, I was asked to speak about that, and so I started a career as a keynote speaker. And one of the places I loved keynote speaking was in the regional areas. So I'd fly in to do a presentation, and I'm a bit of a believer that if I'm going to be in town, I just don't talk for an hour, and someone would say, oh, will you go and have a chat to the bakery? They're struggling a bit. Or, well, we've got a couple of people who are thinking of starting a business. Can you spend a couple of hours with them? So soon I wasn't just coming back to do speaking, I was coming back to do consulting as well. I love regional work. I got to see things that I would never see otherwise, and they feed you well and they look after you really, really well. Around that time, the New South Wales state government came to me and said, look, we've got a lot of high-level consultants who are charging us considerable amounts of money to do marketing plans for our major centres. We would like a product that we can use for towns under 5,000 people. So I went away and I put my thinking cap on and I thought, well, if you can do a marketing plan for a business, you must be able to do it for a township. So that was the start of the Township Marketing Plan program. Initially it was only in New South Wales. Since then I've worked all along the East Coast, including Queensland. What I'm going to talk about today in part of the presentation is the process that I actually use to do a township marketing plan. To date I have done 60 plans and I've worked with over 200 small communities. So when I took small communities, I think my smallest community was Galargambone, out past Dubbo. I have also worked with a couple of larger communities, including Armidale and the CBD in Mackay. So 3 parts of my presentation. The first thing I'm going to talk about, big picture, so what I'm actually seeing in the regional communities. I'm then going to walk you through the process, and then last of all I'm going to just give you my first impressions from my 2 days here, and I'll explain how that works as well. Okay, so what are some of the factors for the changing face of regional Queensland? The first thing is severe climate change. I don't need to tell you guys about this, you are in the middle of it. And of course the biggest impact in the first instance is on our primary producers. And that flows on to everybody else. And there's been a lot of push in regional areas for primary producers to start to diversify. We've also had changes to major industries. So whether it is mining coming into a town, or mining affecting a town, or it could be like something as simple as losing a major business. A number of years ago, Kyogle lost their major industry. They worked out that the impact on the local businesses was $21 million, just by the loss of one major industry. So you are at the mercy of changes to larger organisations. We're seeing new opportunities from that, and a change in focus. A big one is the recognition of the quality of life in regional Queensland. So it used to be, I don't know what it's like here, but I come from Sydney. It used to be the only thing that Sydney-siders knew about regional life was the Easter show. That's what we thought regional life was all about. Since then, there's lots more programs on TV about regional life. I think what made a huge difference was a number of years ago, Farmer Finds a Wife. People started looking at regional areas completely differently. People are now looking at the difference between city life and regional life. So we're seeing new markets, we're seeing returners. So a lot of people who left, had a great time, went to uni, travelled overseas, did all that sort of stuff, got married, maybe had one child, looked around and went, gee, their life's nothing like my life was when I was a kid, and I'm missing my connections with family. So people are starting to return in their droves, but they're coming back with big city mindsets, some of them. We're also seeing interest from outsiders, so people for seed change, tree changes. And suddenly, of course, as Peter was saying, everyone is now in the tourism business. And what that means for a lot of us is loss of our traditional life and loss of peace. And suddenly we've got more demanding local consumers. So suddenly these guys who were always happy with the bakery in town suddenly want sourdough. And they want to have double lattes, and they want to be doing the avocado on toast for Sunday breakfast, which is a bit of a shock when you are used to one way of life. So what are some of the key issues that we see for small communities? Number one is the impact of changing population profiles. And I tend to find this is something that sneaks up on people. They've been looking one way, they've been looking at the local community, and meanwhile, little groups have been sneaking in without being noticed. Capitalising on growing tourism opportunities. You're lucky, you are in an area where you actually have fantastic tourism product, but you also have one of the fastest growing areas in terms of tourism, from what Peter was saying. Controlling escape spending. Note, I don't say stop escape spending, it is a fact of life, but if you can control it, every person who stays in town longer and spends longer is actually controlling that escape spending. Another thing I'm seeing in areas is fallout from council amalgamations. So I will be talking to someone who will be going, oh, well, the council have done this, this, this and this and this, and it's all down to the amalgamation. When did you amalgamate? 10 years ago? People can't let go of things that are actually holding them back from making positive changes. I understand, I haven't been through it, I don't know how traumatic it is, but it is a factor that is holding back some regional communities. Small business survival. If we do not have a vibrant small business community, we do not have a community. One of the factors is inexperienced retail and business operators. Fact of life that people sometimes fall into owning a small business. Sometimes people get into it and then go, oh my goodness, what have I done? And it's not always easy to get advice. And then there's the lifestyle versus revenue. Everybody wants you to be open 7 days a week. Well, sometimes we need a life. We can't afford to open 7 days a week, or we don't want to open 7 days a week. But do we need strategies so that we can employ other people from the community and then increase our opening hours? The impact of technology and communication. I think this is probably the biggest trend of all, that we are not tapping into modern technology enough. And what I'm talking about here is access, so phone reception, internet reception. I have to say I have more bars here than I do at home, which surprised me somewhat. Quality connections, apps, social media, websites, whether you are in a regional area, whether you are in a city, these days you cannot ignore the impact of that technology. So what are some of the opportunities we're seeing? One of the things that's relatively easy to do is to tailor the business product mix in response to population changes. So if you're aware of what's happening with your population, start to tailor individual product mixes within the town. Also, tailor The business mixes. I mean, one of the things that you actually have, which is an advantage, it's not a great advantage, but you do have vacancies in most towns. So that you can actually start to look at, well, what businesses would we bring in there? Maximise the revenue from your existing market. Have a look around. You know, are you targeting all of the market? Are you missing opportunities? Does anyone know Cobar? Yeah, Cobar's a great town. I love Cobar. I did a project in Cobar, it probably was about 12 years ago, and I was talking to all the business community about who they thought their target markets were. And they were telling me, well, you know, we've got the farmers who've moved in, and we've got these people, and we've got those people, and we've got the 45 plus. And then there was no mention, and I kept seeing things like daycare centres and stuff to do with children, but no one mentioned young families. So I did a bit more research, and I could certainly see there was evidence of young families. So I went back to the business community, who were predominantly over 45, and if you went shopping in Cobar, most of the products in most of the shops was targeted over 45. And I said, well, what are these young people that I'm seeing in town? Oh, they're the itinerants. Oh, okay, so what do you mean by itinerant? Well, you know, they come and they before the days of fly in, fly out, they're working for mines, they're working for other industries, etc., etc. Oh, okay, I understand that. So what do we know about them? Oh, well, they don't support us. They go to Dubbo and do all their shopping there. Okay. So how long does an itinerant stay in Cobar? 8 years. True story. The business community had been so focused on their traditional community, this is our town, they'd forgotten the fact that there was all these itinerants who weren't actually made welcome. And really, can you call 8 years itinerant? Absolutely not. So they were walking away from lots of opportunities for revenue. Tap into the revenue from tourists and visitors. Obvious one, most of you are already doing it, but don't assume you know who those tourists and visitors are. I see a lot of communities who are going, oh, those tourists have got no money. Well, they may have money, they may not have money, but they will spend on the right things. And it's how you actually market your products and services to get them to spend more. Recognise part-time residents. So in some areas that might be people who have bought hobby farms in the area, people who would like to live in the area, people who are looking to live in the area. I did some work in Crookwell, just out of Goulburn, a little farming community, and they used to have a whole lot of part-time residents who had hobby farms. They only traded 5.5 days a week, or pretty much 5 days a week until 10 on Saturday morning. And one of their big challenges was all those part-time residents weren't part of the community because they didn't shop there, they got onto the property and they stayed there. So we worked with the local supermarket and there was a local butcher, and we started a program where we approached all of these part-time residents through the real estate agents who knew who they were, and we got in touch with them and we said, there's a new service in town. Instead of stopping in Goulburn and buying all your groceries for your weekend, you can email them through to our local supermarket, and they'll also hand it on to the butcher, and they'll pack your order. And anyone want to guess what they did with their order once it was packed? Sorry? No, didn't deliver it. These guys were coming through town on a Friday night. Took it to the pub. So put it in the cool room. So the first time they got there, they'd come through and they'd go, oh, I'm here to collect my order. And they'd go straight out the back and they'd pick up their order and they'd leave. And it took them a couple of times, and then they'd walk in and someone would say, g'day, mate. They go, oh, g'day. Then they'd stop for a beer. Then they'd bring the whole family in for a counter tea. And suddenly they now know people, and they're down the main street on a Saturday morning, and they've got the hat and the jeans, because they're all city slickers, wandering around going, I'm a part of this community. You know, so part-time locals are valuable. And I was really interested, I think, when I was in Muttaburra, and they were talking about their campsite. And I was thinking, okay, you know, grey nomads there for a little bit. Some of them stay for 2 months. You know, I think that almost qualifies them as part-time local status. You know, what can you do to make that stay better and get them spending more and more. Create a competitive brand and image. This sounds terribly, terribly serious. But these days, towns are all competing with each other. And can I say, it is no longer good enough to say, we are a tidy town, or heritage. So heritage is the new quality. It doesn't actually mean much anymore. You know, so people are looking for a proper brand. So a brand is simply the values that your visitors or your locals are going to attach to your name. You know, so whether it is the excitement city or whether it is the outback adventure capital, they want to know what you are known for. And they're going to position you in relation to other places. And I'll talk a bit more about how they do that and why they do that. Proactively attract businesses and skills. So it's very easy in a regional town, and I know it's tough at the moment, to sit there and go, oh geez, we've got 6 vacancies in town. Well, how many of you, by the way, have business progress associations or tourism associations in each town? You would have those in each town? Some do, some don't? Okay. So even if you get the businesses together and have a look and say, well, what do we need in town? And then actually start looking for those kind of businesses. I worked with a little town called Toukley. I think they had a coffee shop, a ski shop, a surf shop because they're near the water, and they decided they wanted, and they had a general store, they wanted a coffee shop and deli. So what happened is 3 of the local business people from the chamber got in the car and did a road trip and actually started looking at successful businesses with that model around New South Wales and made some direct approaches. So they advertised them in the local real estate agent with preferred usage or usage that is actually supported by the local community. So that way people who are thinking of starting a business go, okay, that aligns with what the community's after. These are little things, but if someone thinks, well, other people believe it can happen, it's easier to get people into a town. How long do you have to live here to be a local? What is it? Okay, that's called nervous laughter, which usually means it's at least generational. A very simple thing we can do is encourage and allow people to be locals. That's what they really, really want. They want to feel like a local. You know, that's part of this attraction of regional living. They have this picture in their mind that they're going to walk down the main street and people are going to say hello to them. And how many of them are actually surprised when it happens? By the way, I have never, ever come across a town with a one-woman welcoming committee. It's NOLA, is it? Yeah. How phenomenal is that? That is, I mean, everybody knows NOLA, I'm assuming? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, she's in Alpha and she sits outside the VIC and personally greets everybody. And if she could make them a cup of tea and give them a ginger biscuit, she would. And I was there, we were there for maybe an hour and she was on duty the whole time. I believe she worked 7 days a week for no pay. Now, what that gives Alpha is an identity and a connection that every single tourist will have. She'll find them, she'll hunt them down, because her job is to say hello and make them feel really welcome. I'm not suggesting you need to do that in every town, but you really should celebrate what you've got. What do successful communities do? The ones that thrive tend to do things slightly differently than the ones that just bounce along the bottom. And I like to talk about the power of one in a regional community. It can be one person. Now, that one person can be a councillor, it can be a religious leader, it can be owner of a major business, it can be, and we've all got them in every town, one of those doers who puts their hands up how many times a day. They make a difference. So we should be celebrating that one person It can be one business. And that business doesn't have to be a grand business. So it could be that someone's been transferred out here and their partner, male or female, doesn't have a job and decides to open a new coffee shop or a new electronic shop or a new hobby shop in the main street. And one shop that's a destination and is successful can change a whole community. There's a community called Dookie. Anyone know Dookie? Site of the Agricultural College. It has a general store, and it used to have a pub and then that disappeared. There were a number of ladies who had moved there with their partners and they had young children and they were looking for a reason to get together and have a glass of wine. So they started an unofficial progress association. Remember, all this is based around getting together once a week, once a month and having a glass of wine. Now that town has a fantastic gourmet pub that is a destination. I think it now has accommodation. They've organised concerts in the Natural Amphitheatre in the area, all done by a small group of people. They have their own website, they have their own welcome wagon. So again, don't think it has to be done by a big organisation. Little changes make a difference. One industry. So a new industry can obviously change the potential, whether that be for trade businesses, whether it be for businesses in the main street. One award. Awards are incredible things. It depends what you do with them. Town called Tatura, out of Shep. By the way, it's all down there at Shep, Tat, Merch, so everything's shortened. So in Tatura, the bakery won the Vanilla Slice Award. Big thing. It was written up in all the papers, and suddenly they were open 7 days a week. People couldn't keep up with the demand for those vanilla slices. So it would have been very easy for that bakery to say, okay, great for my business, but that bakery actually went to other businesses in the main street and said, look, if any of you are prepared to open on a Sunday, I'll do everything I can to promote you. You can put stock in my shop, I'll send them down to you, we can put tables outside the bakery, and suddenly Tat's gone from a very quiet little town to suddenly a bustling community. They didn't stop there, of course. The pie shop in Maroopna won the Meat Pie Award one year, and suddenly we've got a bakery trail. People love an opportunity to travel and eat. You know, and you've got bakeries in all your towns. So, you know, you could easily have a bakery trail with a specialty in every single bakery. Whether you tie that specialty to your main attraction, but people like a reason to go from one place to another. One idea, you know, one meeting. And it's actually people when working together and forming teams. Creating a shared vision of a community and of a wider community makes a huge difference in how we market. So a lot of towns tend to market as silos. This is all ours. We're not going to share it because we're actually really secretly in competition with our towns just down the road. Your visitors don't care. Your visitors don't see you as individual towns. Your visitors see you as an experience. So you remember I talked about the Township Marketing Plan program that the New South Wales government asked me to put together. When I started thinking about it, I thought, well, how do I work out where to start? What do I look at? So I decided that when I go into a town, I won't know anything. So before I came here, I didn't do any research, official research. I didn't read any council reports. I came in thinking of myself as I was, a visitor or a potential resident. So the first thing I do is I put on my objective eyes. And we do what's called a town audit. So here, and this is stuff you can do in your business, as well as I want to show you the process that we've been going through. So take a long, hard look at all the aspects of your town. So while I've been doing this, I've actually had a guide. So Angela from Council has been my eyes and ears. it's been dreadful for her because she's not allowed to say anything. Until I've actually had a look, and I might make a statement and I'll say, is that right or wrong? Then she can tell me what she knows as a local. So the first thing is to be completely objective. So what do I look at? I look at signage. You know, do you have town entrance signs that are current? Are they all consistent? Do we have them in the same place in every town? As business owners, you can think about the same thing. You know, what about your signage? Is it appropriate for people who are driving through town? So a lot of retailers tend to think that everybody faces their retail outlet straight on. When you think about it, not many actually do. Most people are walking down the main street and they see you side on. So a sign that might be handwritten and you can see quite clearly when you hang it up can't be seen from passing traffic. So have a look at the signs and make sure they're relevant. Are they consistent? You know, is it saying shopping centre in every town, or is it saying shopping centre in every town and business centre in others? You know, from a visitor's point of view, we need to make it easy for them. So we look at signage. We look at visibility. So can we see the town? Do we bypass the town? Can we see the town from the bypass? What do we see when we come through? So one of the things I do, my phone at the moment is full of videos. So as I come into town, I actually video it all the way through to see what sort of feel it's got. I went to Lake Cargellico once. It's cool, I like Lake Cargellico. And guess what's the first thing you see as you drive into town? An enormous sign that says, Lake Cargellico will not tolerate domestic violence. Wind up your windows and drive on through, folks. And I said to them, so how bad is this domestic violence problem? We don't have a domestic violence problem. Oh, but the government paid me $1,000 to put the sign up. So for $1,000, how many people decided not to stop in Lake Cargellico? But when you're a local, you don't see that stuff. So, you know, when you drive home today, I want you to drive into town and open your eyes. Don't just go, yeah, I'm a local, I'm heading home. Have a look and think what visitors see for the first time. What are your architecture or heritage value? You know, you've got some great architecture up here. It's not like I have seen in other places. You've got some quirky, fantastic buildings. Not all of them on the main street, and I know you've got heritage trails, but the more you've got that is different and unusual, and stuff that, and by the way, it doesn't have to be beautiful heritage. You know, a country pub may not be the most glamorous thing on the planet, but you know it's a country pub. And if it looks like an outback pub, even better. You know, so sometimes we try too hard to sanitise everything. You know, we've got to leave the personality of the town intact. Streetscaping. Is there anywhere to sit? You know, or are you sitting somewhere where you shouldn't be sitting, or somewhere that's not appropriate? Are there bins? What sort of bins are they? Are there plantings? So I noticed in a couple of towns there's nice little pot plants, planted boxes all the way down the main street. So they're things that actually have an impact on people who are driving through. Access and egress, so how you get in and how you get out. It's pretty simple for most of you, but in some towns it can be a nightmare. Not here, but I have worked in towns where there's access and egress where you have to, you know, go around areas that you would never have a clue how to get there. What are the public amenities like? They're not glamorous, but they're vital. You know, clean toilets, toilets in the main street, toilets in businesses that are accessible by people. So again, it's one of the basic needs, and boy, if people need to go, they need to stop. And if they need to stop, then hopefully they won't be those people who just use the loo and take off. They'll hang around and have a cup of coffee at the very least. What are your local attractions? And how do I know that there are local attractions? So is there signage? Is there a display? It's like your your bulls all the way through. So they pull people through the town in Aramac. I look at the retail mix, and this is really interesting. So from the retail mix, I start to see, well, what are the essential businesses in town? What are the products ranges in stores? So what I'm doing here, and I've been to a lot of businesses, I didn't get to absolutely everybody, but I got to all the major businesses in most of the towns, and I have a look at the stock on the shelves to see who the business owner thinks is their target market. So I look at things like the volume of own brand or black and gold product. I look at the volume of baby product. I look at the volume of what I'd call gourmet or higher priced items to lower priced items. You'd be amazed how much you can read. And then we look at things like what sort of fruit and veg are there. Sure, we look at the quality, but if there's no ginger and there's no herbs, then we're certainly not looking at a community that likes to be adventurous with its cooking. If I go to the butcher and there's no value-add meat, so there's no stuff in marinades and that sort of thing, we are probably dealing with a retiree population, or maybe even a population of primary producers where they just like big slabs of meat on their plate. So think about it as you go around. You go to the pharmacy and you have a look at what cosmetic brands they stock. Pharmacy, you also have a look at different and unusual ranges. So if you have a lot of splints and things for sports injuries, tends to tell you you've got a sporting town. If you've got lots of walking frames, then you would probably guess you've got a higher percentage of older people. See how it works? So you're actually being a detective. You can go back and do this in your town. And you can probably work out who your supermarket or general store thinks is their target market. We look at stock levels in stores. Why do you think we look at stock levels? Anyone want to guess? Well, yeah, turnover of stock. Oh, by the way, we look at dust as well. Unless you've just had a big dust storm, dust means things aren't moving very fast. They're not turning over very quickly. It could also mean we've got a retailer who is not that interested in cleaning stock. Stock levels can mean that a business is struggling. Or, which is common in regional areas, you happen to be leasing a space you can't afford to fill. Simple strategy for dealing with that, put a false wall in and merchandise over a smaller space. Because all of the retailers know that as soon as certain bits of stock get low, they stop selling. You know, if you've got well-stocked shelves, they'll continue to turn. Window displays. We look at window displays because that is a representation of what's in your store. There was a community in, I'm just trying to think of the name, doesn't matter, they had a baker. And that baker would bake every Friday, they would bake 5 lemon tarts. And even if there was a conference in town, or they knew there were going to be visitors in town, they baked 5 lemon tarts. Their window display was a pack of 6 bread rolls in the plastic in the window. That was it. So you certainly didn't walk in there thinking, oh my God, this is such a bounteous display of things to buy. Window displays tell people what to expect. Unfortunately, people assume that everybody knows what's inside. And so therefore, they go, well, you know, I change the window every 3 months whether it needs it or not. Blowflies, well, they're just a fact of life. But when your tourists come through or your potential residents come through, it kind of says, well, nothing's changed in the window, so nothing's certainly changed inside. So those basic retail principles of rotating stock, doing window displays make a huge difference. So if I walk into a town and there's a whole lot of empty shops, so I call them, you know, they're gaps in your smile, that can actually also be the same as not having a lot of product on your shelf. But if you've got a proactive business community that's gone to some of those property owners and said, can we put a display in your empty shop, then suddenly the whole town looks more vibrant. Customer service. Really hard for me to judge customer service, especially my face has been around for the last few weeks. But generally speaking, customer service can be judged. I'm not talking about here. Most of my visits have been very friendly and I've been really welcomed. But in some towns, you find that customer service is reserved for locals. You know, and you're there and somebody is getting fantastic customer service. Oh, hi, you. How are you? Oh, how are those new puppies you've got? Oh, my goodness, so good to see you. Look, I've put something aside for you. And you as the tourist, with a wallet full of money, and I'm an example, I travel a lot in regional areas. I do most of my shopping, clothes shopping, gift shopping, in regional areas. Because there you've got clever retailers who've picked the eyes out of the stock. Much rather do that than go wandering around, and I know it's probably not the same for you, but go wandering around Myer or DJ's. So customer service, how good is it? Is it reactive? By reactive I mean waiting until someone says something to you before you say something to them. You know, walking into shops and they're so busy sorting stock that they haven't bothered to say hello. Unfortunately for you guys, in regional centres, country towns, they expect it to be better than it is anywhere else because the expectation is you're all friendly. And by the end of the tourism season, how friendly are we? It's like, oh, just go home. But it's a fact of life, and they are your livelihood for a period of time. It's kind of like I can relax when they're gone. But you need to make your money while they're here, and customer service is it's not about being nice, it's about holding people alongside you long enough to make them buy something and then making them love you enough to come back again and again and again. You can keep your marketing strategies as long as you've got, and don't bother about those, as long as you have a customer service strategy. Probably the most important thing in your business. Presence at the Visitor Information Centre. So when I go to VICs, I look for all the usual brochures, you know, council documents, Outback Queensland booklets. I also look for information from local businesses. And you'd be amazed at how few local businesses promote in the Visitor Information Centre. In really progressive towns, I see that a whole group of businesses might have got together, funded a little leaflet. I've seen some fantastic ones called Day In. So they've done a day in this location, and all the local businesses have got together and said, well, you know, you might go to the cafe for breakfast, then you'd go and see this attraction, then you'd come back and have a bit of a browse amongst our gift and fashion shops. That's actually in the offering. So I'm a believer that you do not separate or differentiate between tourism and small business. You know, so I'm not a believer in we only promote attractions, we don't promote businesses. I tend to think in small communities you need to do both because a visitor doesn't differentiate. A visitor sees a cafe or lunch or a great gift shop as a part of that experience. Food retailing. So, what's the coffee like? You know, and that's the question that everybody's asking. And you all know who does the best coffee in town. Yep. So a lot of our visitors have to discover it. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I have to rely on anecdotal evidence for that. What are the range of mealtime options? You know, so is there anything if I'm coming through at 6 o'clock in the morning? What are my nighttime options? So simple stuff there is, if I'm doing an audit around that, what do I look for? Signs that show me when they're open and when they're closed. Nothing worse than standing inside a shop that's closed and not knowing that they only open every second Wednesday from 10 till 3. And I'm standing out there going, I really like that. So some of the other things we look at, again, we talked about this before, but the image and branding for each of the towns, how consistent is it? How themed is it? The professionalism and skills of the business people. Trading hours. So trading hours have a huge impact on escape spending. A dream for everybody would be 7-day trading. You'd love to see it as well. Not practical in all areas. But if you're not open on a Sunday, is there a complementary business that is? Can you promote it? And should you promote it? Absolutely. There's nothing worse than someone standing outside a supermarket that's closed on a Sunday and going, OK, I better keep going to Emerald. You know, if they don't know that there's actually a business, another business open that may not be on the main street. So the longer we can hold people in town, the better and the easier. What's the history of the town's development? So that's a part of the sort of thing I look at. You know, is it a town that's been built on the railways? Was it built on something completely different? Was it primary producers all the way through? What's the population profile? So this is the sort of stuff that if you were starting a business, you should be looking at. Population profiles, Bureau of Stats are brilliant these days. Council, do you provide any population stats at all? Through Bureau of Stats, okay. What are the community values? So what are the things that are true to each community? So in my travels around, not every community feels the same. And when you dig into it, you start to understand that they've got different values, things that they will put ahead of each other. What's the business community attitudes? So when I often will talk to representatives of the business community, by the way, this is a two-way conversation. Once we've gone through this phase, I'm then going to be actually asking people for feedback. So I'll be sending out be making available my email address and my phone number if you want to ring me, but for feedback from actual businesses, because it's part of this process. So at the moment, I'm looking at it and making first impressions and judgments, but that's only half of the story. So that's the retail audit, the business audit, but you also need to do a tourism audit. So you put on your critical visitor eyes, same thing. And what do we look at? We look at tourist information and signage, types and quality of accommodation. You know, so if you've got a community that only has one type of accommodation, that's fine as long as you only have one type of visitor. I noticed there's a few B&Bs. I think there's a couple of Airbnbs in the area, which is fantastic. There may be potential for different types. I think there's a station stay as well, or at least one station stay. So the more variety you've got, the more of those destination visitors you're going to pull through. What are the things to see and do? You are blessed with a lot of things to see and do. And even things that you don't think are interesting are fascinating to visitors. I mean, where else puts hats on termite mounds? Hello? I'm driving along and I said to Angela, am I going nuts? Did I just see a hat on a termite mound? She went, yeah, that's what we do up here. Okay, not seen that anywhere before. What's the atmosphere and appeal? Do I feel welcome in a main street? Business open hours from a tourist perspective. What I think is interesting is, generally speaking, nighttime options are thinner on the ground in regional areas. And in some towns we need to look at ways that we can actually boost that nighttime offering. A place called Bullaroo, I think it's Bullaroo, no, sorry, got the name. Anyway, it's in New South Wales. They had no eating options at night whatsoever. They had a bowls club, but the Chinese guy who used to run the restaurant had left. So how did they keep people in town? They had 3 B&Bs. So they went to the primary producers and said, is anyone interested in doing station dinners? And the local tourist information centre said, we'll drop them off and pick them up. Don't need to be a fancy meal. What they really want to do is sit round a big table and chat and maybe get to look at some stuff. And so therefore, their primary producers were happy to actually share their lifestyle with them. Eventually they found another operator for the bowls club, but they kept on with the station dinners. So it's become a feature of the area. What are the basic needs from a tourist perspective? Parking, toilets, dump sites. And because you're dealing with a lot of caravanners, it's actually good to have a look at what caravanners actually need. So small appliances is often something that they're really keen on. A lot of them love things for the grandkids. So they're travelling, they want to be able to communicate, they want to be able to send them things home. Again, what are our food options? It's pretty similar to our local audit. And again, coffee. You know, what's the quality? If anyone is interested in this presentation, by the way, we're going to make it available to anybody who wants it. So we'll just email it to you if you're fed up taking notes. So once I've done all that, I start to get a feeling, and I get a few ideas about what might be happening in the area. And then I start talking to people. And you can do the same. Now, talk to friends and family. What's your opinion of? Talk to the progressive retailers. There will be retailers who've shaken things up a bit or do things a bit differently. You know, get them in a room and actually have a chat to them. Talk to our established retailers. They've been there, they've done that. Some of them have been there and done it so long that they don't want to do it anymore. But they're going to be looking at things very, very differently to our new and progressive operators. Who were the first people to identify population changes? Real estate agents, stock and station agents. You know, so if you're starting a business and you want to know what's happening with the population, these are the people to talk to. Pharmacists, especially new families in town, where's the first place they go? Pharmacists. Post office is the other. So even in your smaller communities, you know, people can sneak in without you realising it. Not that it applies here, but owners of large franchises often keep data on visitation. So you can tap into that data. And then, of course, there's your club and pub people. They often see a different market. So they might see people who really never visit anyone else, but they're always at the pub on a Friday night. Your tourism operators. So again, we tend to separate them from the business community. We should be talking to them about who they're seeing. So what we're doing is we're building a picture of the area. So that's what I've been doing over the last couple of days. I haven't seen every single business. I've seen most of them. In subsequent visits, I'll actually be talking more one-on-one with business owners, testing theories, getting their ideas on what's happening. So once you've got some ideas, and I've already got some ideas, we then need to back up that gut feel. And at this stage, we start talking to larger organisations. So as a part of this project, I'm going to be sending a first impressions report to Stephen. So that will give him some feedback on my first thoughts. I'm interested in talking to any of the business associations, formal or informal, or tourist associations in any of the communities. Business Queensland, we can look to that to see if there's any funding programs we can tap into. Tourism Events Queensland on the big scale, but locally, more important, we're talking to OQTA, and I've already had a bit of a chat to John, and I think there's some information that he'll be able to provide, which we can overlay across our local information. Business advisory centres, I don't know whether you have access to any of those, but that's something we'll look at to see if there's anywhere we can get good, free or cost-effective business advice. So once you've got your impressions, we then start to think about, okay, who do we think the target markets are? And what's the product mix? And this is judged by looking at stock in retail outlets. Then I ask for the business community's impression. So what I'm looking for there are disconnects. So I might think one thing, the business community might think another. The business community knows what's happening way more than I do, but sometimes those fresh eyes can actually identify potential market segments, emerging sectors, or opportunities that everybody else has just missed or doesn't think is important. What's the vision? So whatever we do will be plugged into those core visions that Stephen was talking about. And they're already pretty well aligned. What are the gaps? So if we want to get there, from a business community point of view, what do we have to do to fill those gaps? And what needs to change to actually achieve that vision? So I'm going to be your gaps person. I'm going to be the person saying, well, you know, maybe we need to change this and maybe we can work with a number of businesses to make that happen. So from a local market point of view, some of the things you need to have a look at. Who are your existing markets and are they changing? So have a look at community profiles, census data, postcode research. Anybody here do postcode research in their business? Cool. It is boring, staff hate it, but it is worth doing to find out exactly who is shopping where. Now, from a local point of view, you should be able to do it fairly easily. I know we were in Alpha yesterday and one of the businesses there was saying that they have, we were in Jericho, and someone there was saying that people come from Alpha to have a look at some of their gift lines because they're different to what they can get in town. So if we've got some evidence of how that cross-marketing is happening, it gives us some opportunities to hold people in town longer. Postcode research is something you don't want to do all the time, but I think it is a great idea to do sporadically. So typically I would do it for 1 week a month for a few months on a different day each week, and you do it for 3-hour blocks, rotating through. That way your staff don't hate you and you get a good idea of who's actually shopping there. You do it in tourism season as well, because I find sometimes assumptions made about tourists are not always correct. So people will say to me, yeah, they all come from the state, they're all Queenslanders. And then we find there's a whole lot of Victorians who are heading north for the winter. What are the escape spending trends? So if you are losing revenue locally, where's it going to? Is it going to Emerald? You know, what are the stopping off points? What are the towns that you are competing with? You can't compete on everything, but you can choose 1 or 2 things that you can make your own. Shopper surveys, great for using with tourists. Put them in cafes. They're sitting around doing nothing. Happily fill out a survey. And especially with your grey nomads, there's a huge amount of ownership. Sometimes too much, I've heard, but they do get a bit involved with the community. They think it's theirs and they want to give you their opinion. What's the anecdotal evidence? So what are businesses saying? Shopping basket surveys. So choose a shopping basket for the region and actually price it at all the supermarkets and all the providers around the region. So it just gives you an idea of where you're sitting in relation to others. For owners of those businesses, it's really good then when someone comes and goes, you know, you're more expensive than so-and-so, and you can go, well, actually, we've done a shopper basket and we are blah, 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 blah. What key products, so what are the products that will be purchased locally? It's really hard as a retailer, and sometimes groups of retailers can do this very effectively, to sit down and say, instead of us all just going, we're going to carry everything, who's going to specialise in what? That way you can get depth in certain ranges rather than having narrow width. What are the barriers to purchasing? So trading hours, a gap in the mix. Town called Old Bar, which is on the coast near Taree in New South Wales, they had a fantastic butcher. He was a star, but he closed every night at 5. So everybody who commuted to Taree would do what? Buy their meat in Taree. So, and nobody had told him any differently. Nobody had gone, if you were open later, I'd shop with you. So we facilitated some discussions with him and a couple of the other retailers. They then started opening a bit later, and they now close at 6:30. his revenue has gone up, or had gone up, about 20%, because he was picking up the local market just by being clever. And you can always ring him. And again, if he's not there, he'll either drop it round or he'll leave it at the pub for you. So things to ask yourself with tourism markets: what are the trends and are you tapping into them? So there was a whole lot of data that Peter talked about. Are we tapping into those trends? Are we meeting the needs of that new family market? Talk to our tourism operators. How often do accommodation providers talk to retailers? Not a lot. There should actually be a discussion. So it goes through, a lot of this is the same as before. So what are the source of your visitors? So your VIC can help there, but be aware that not everybody goes to the VICs. They all go and see NOLA because they don't have a choice. But everywhere else, a lot of people are now doing all their planning on their phone. We know that the VICs will continue to be popular with some travellers, and particularly older, more traditional travellers, but there are a new breed that like to get on their phone and work through it. Do you have day trippers? If so, where are they coming from? Do you have passers-by? Are you actually a destination? And that's a pretty important question. I was asked to do a tourism strategy for a suburb of Sydney called Blacktown. Anyone heard of Blacktown? Not the most salubrious place on the planet. But at that stage they had Wonderland, which was the big theme park. And so they figured because everybody was going to Wonderland, they could be a tourism destination. Guess what? Wonderland was out of town. They came on the buses, they went on the buses, got in their car, drove it. No one went near Blacktown. But when we went through this sort of process, what did we discover? Well, thanks to the Olympics, they had amazing sporting facilities. So instead of being a tourism destination, we became a sports tourism destination. So by closing down the offer, and I had to say to councillors, get over yourself, you are not a destination, we suddenly had a much better, stronger tourism product. So, some places are going to be destinations, others are going to be time fillers. Part of this project will look at increasing length of stay. And I'm not necessarily talking about from 3 weeks to 3 months. I could be talking about from 40 minutes to 2 hours. You can spend a lot of money in 2 hours if you really work at it. Holiday makers, VFR, do you have a VFR market here? Because I've not heard it mentioned to date, but in a lot of regional areas, there are people who come back to spend time with family. Special interest. And I know you've got some of these. One I have never ever heard of before. I'll talk about that in a minute. And how do you link your towns and experiences? And I think this is a challenge for you guys because I don't actually think you are doing a lot of linking at the moment. So what's your town's unique selling proposition? Okay, this is marketing jargon. It's the one thing that makes you special, unique or different. Is it your retail mix? Is it your service mix? Is there a specific business in town that is a destination? If it is pulling people into town, so whether it's the winner of the Vanilla Slice Award, please let them have some limelight. They will pass it on to you. Is it an event? You have some fantastic events in this area. How do businesses feed off it? If there's something happening at the sports grounds, do business owners need to be travelling there and getting people while they're in the area, rather than letting them just sit out at the racecourse? Is it your location? So if you look at Amarak, one of the big things with Amarak is it's the gateway to the sculpture trail. So that is a location-based attraction. Is there a specific attraction? Now, most towns that I've been to have a number of attractions, which is fantastic, because it means I'm just not going to one place, I'm going to a series. Natural beauty you have in spades. The issue is people finding it and being confident enough to get to it. because some of it can look a bit scary as you turn off onto a dirt road. Some people love it, some people are nervous of it. Heritage, you have fantastic heritage values. Your museums are an absolute triumph. You know, most of your museums are full of really good quality product. I was particularly blown away with the hospital at Muttaburra. Has everyone been to see that? Okay, yeah, it's a must. Is it just quirky? Is it the termites with hats? You know, again, celebrate stuff that is different and unusual. So how do we tap into revenue from these local markets? Fill the product and business gaps. 2-in-1 concepts, you excel at this. I saw 30, I've seen 30-in-1 concepts. So basically a 2-in-1 concept is where you might have a florist and a bookshop. Your retailers are very good and you just about stock everything. One of the issues might be how you merchandise it. So it is really clear to people just exactly what you've got. Work with progressive businesses. There are businesses that will want to change, there are businesses that don't want to change. Every business has the right to run their business as they wish. So no one like me should be telling people how to run their business unless they want help. So again, progressive businesses or new businesses that are doing it differently can help set the bar higher. Develop strategies to increase average spend. I mean, this is simple stuff. This is, you know, I mean, there's a worldwide example of this. I think it's worth $1.something billion. Anyone want to guess what it is? Would you like fries with that? It is the ultimate add-on sale. So it's about how you package things. So again, if you've got gifts and you package them up and the price goes from $14 to $28, suddenly you've increased your average spend. There are basic retail concepts that every business can use to increase average spend. Develop strategies to increase visits. Specials are great for this. Again, loss leaders get them in the door. You have to make sure then you sell them more. It's your range of products that will get them coming back again and again. Improving customer service even with locals is worthwhile doing. Training new staff and not just allowing them to copy the habits of old staff. Promoting the benefits of shopping locally. And I've noticed quite a few businesses are doing that, especially around Christmas, which is great. Increasing communication via technology. So we need to see more opportunities to actually communicate with locals as well as visitors. So what we're seeing increasingly in cities now, so Lane Cove, which is a little village about 4K out of Sydney, so lovely little village, actually has an app for the locals. Do you know why they have an app for the locals? Because the parking is awful. So on the app, before you leave town, you open the app and it will tell you where the car park vacancies are real time. Pretty amazing. But that is a communication with the locals. As a part of that app, anyone who's got a special, anyone who wants to promote something, actually accesses their own account and can actually do a feed. So they're consistently communicating with the locals. Our visitors, it's tailoring our marketing methods to visitors as well as locals. So traditionally, small businesses have one marketing message and they roll it out there and they wait for someone to fall over it. I'm actually suggesting you might need two different messages. One for tourists and one for locals. So if you're a cafe, the local message might be about something that no one else in town carries, but the tourist message might be about your outdoor seating area or your air-conditioned seating area, depending what season it is. Social media. How many people here have Facebook pages for their business? Cool. How many people here use Instagram? Excellent. There is a whole lot of social media stuff we should be doing as a matter of course, both as townships and as individual businesses. Does anyone do familials? I mean, I know that OQTA does, but does anyone do like smaller scale familials? Maybe bringing the accommodation providers from Emerald in, showing them around the town. Maybe bringing businesses from other towns in, show them around, so that you can start to form a relay. People can start talking about, oh, I was there the other day. Displays at visitor information centres, including businesses. Cross-promotion with tour operators, and I don't know that you have a lot of tour operators at the moment, but it is worthwhile looking at. Do we need to develop that as product? And if we do, how do we cross-promote with them? Publicity. As individuals and as towns. It's interesting. Publicity is very difficult to get in a lot of fields unless it is around tourism. Tourism is sexy. They want to tell your stories, either as individual businesses or as groups of businesses. So you don't have to wait for someone else to get you publicity. You can actually say, well, I reckon I should be featured in so-and-so and so-and-so, and you can actually make an approach. Events. So again, this is where using online communication, you can get people back for specific events. So if you're an accommodation provider collecting email addresses, what's to stop you doing a mail out to talk about the annual festival? And we're giving our regulars first dibs at accommodation. Oh, and by the way, here's a few things some of the businesses are doing to celebrate it. Are there any cash cow towns that you can leverage to get people into your town? Mass media. I'm not a huge fan of mass media in terms of tourism marketing. I think it is necessary, but I think you can usually do a lot more effectively online and through social media. We talked a bit about this before, but creating a brand or an image for your town. Most of you have pretty clear ideas of what your town is, what its main attraction is. Probably less ideas about what are your next level of attractions. So what are the things that are going to get people to stop? Your gateway signs, your town entrances, the streetscape, flags, umbrellas, and I know that not everybody can do this because of main roads, but if you can create interest on the footpath, and this is where window displays come in. I'm driving through, oh, there's a quilting shop. I can't drive past a quilting shop ever. You have to stop. So it's those sorts, it's not necessarily a traditional shop, it's, oh look, that supermarket sells so-and-so. That coffee shop has my favourite brand of coffee. People are making decisions on whether they stop as they drive through. Planters, A-boards. So to take this to the next level, what do you have to do? Well, you need to start building ownership. So tapping into existing business groups, form new groups. So I was talking to someone in the break who said they'd love to form a group. My recommendation is don't make it formal to start with. Meet in a pub somewhere, or meet in someone's business and have a couple of drinks and just get talking and start sharing information. As soon as it gets down to minutes and office bearers and all the rest of it, it can all go to mush pretty quickly. If you've got a few people who are motivated, that's the best place to start. Do it socially rather than formally. Do group research exercises. So a group of businesses get together and do postcode research for a month. Share information. And that's something as a business owner we find hard, like that's our business. But sometimes sharing things like average spend. So if you calculate your average spend, and most businesses should know it, then you should be able to compare it to this year to next year, and next year to the year after. The shopping basket survey we talked about before, cafe research, team up, create a trail, build relays, make sure people stay in the region for longer. Skills development, I think that's something that Stephen and I are going to be talking about. I know one of the things we're looking at doing is making me available for one-on-one consults, either online or face-to-face when I'm in town, for any business who is interested. And if we do this, it's confidential. So there's no reports going back to council, sorry guys, but it will be just a chance to sit down and maybe talk about your merchandising, talk about your customer service. I'm pretty hands-on. If you want to look at window displays, I'll pull stock out and we'll rearrange it all. But sometimes it's just nice to have someone out there that you can talk to who is completely objective. So we're certainly going to be looking at doing that. When I'm in the community, we might get some groups of businesses together. Like if there's enough people who are interested in starting a business, we might pull them all together for a discussion or a forum. Facilitated meetings. To make this stuff happen, workshops, days like today, we need to all start working on it, and you guys, most importantly, working as a group. So if we're going to do this, here's some handy hints. Try the easiest things first. So if there's something easy you can do with a big impact, and this goes for your business as well, so this might be changing the signs that have always been there on your business. It might be redoing your window display. There's nothing better than people coming in and going, gosh, this is new stock. And you're going, I've had it out the back for ages, I haven't been able to move it, but because I put it in a prime position, awesome. You'll never change the whingers, the moaners, the doom and gloomers. You all know who they are. Don't waste energy on people who do not want to change. So I've watched a lot of economic development managers over the years go, oh my God, this business has got so much potential. If only I could get them to change. It's their business. You do not have the right to make them change. Use your energy and dollars carefully. So spend it where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. And usually that is not an ad that makes you feel better because you paid money for an ad. Usually the most effective things require you to actually do something. Keep people informed and involved. A lot of people are focused on the one big thing. If only we had. I understand that. It'd be great if you had it. Just do something while you're waiting for the one big thing. Don't panic. Doing one thing well is better than trying to do 10 things half-heartedly. So, just to finish up, I'm going to talk about my first impressions. So, they're not right, they're not wrong, they're just my impressions. And this is the stuff that I would quite like your feedback on. So if you want to email me and go, you are so wrong, I'm going to read every single email. So, starting from when I found out I was coming to an area I have never been before, and I'll be honest, I've never heard about before, I did what any visitor would do, and I Googled. You have poor online visibility. 5 out of 10, guys. And I think if you're going to do one thing, this is probably the thing to start focusing on. Search engine optimisation for the area, you're not coming up. So that means businesses don't have place pages. Businesses don't have active Facebook pages. Groups of businesses are missing opportunities. Towns don't have place pages. So you want to be, when I put in this area, everything comes up. There's things with arrows, there's dots, there's a million feeds. So yes, I'm getting the council, yes, I'm getting OQTA, but I'm not seeing a lot else. So there's a lack of social media. And the other thing you're missing out on is reviews. So these days, if I want to go somewhere, what do? I head for the reviews to find out what I want to do, and if you don't have reviews, you don't exist. Dealing with bad reviews is a whole other story, and that's another session. But you are missing out on an opportunity. You have a fantastic region. You have fantastic product. So you have to share it. And if you are a dinosaur, no pun intended, find someone who is savvy, interested and capable. You had way more quality product than I expected from an online search. So from almost the first town I went to, I was going, oh, really? Oh. So surprise factor is lovely, but if I've made my decision to go somewhere else because I couldn't find that information online, you've missed out. I'm not sure your online sets expectations for what I'm going to get. What I loved is each town has a distinct personality and a distinct promise. So it wasn't like I was dealing with a whole lot of towns that were cookie cutter. I was dealing with distinct regional communities. I think there's a strong differentiation, which is good, with some common links. So I quite like the fact that sculptures popped up in different towns in the region. I like the fact that murals became a bit of a recurring theme. So it made me feel like I was still in the area. I think there's a bit of a silo approach with your marketing. So at the moment it is town by town by town. I think there's enormous potential to create a journey that Stephen was talking about. High quality, so you don't just have product, it is fairly well developed in most cases. I think it's authentic. So if you look at it, some of your museums are not glamorous and they are just a collection of cool stuff. But there's something quite attractive about that. And I like the way that people have leveraged off that. So there might be the attraction and then they do a Sunday brunch or morning tea. So community have latched on to some of those and given people an opportunity to meet members of the community. I think these, you know, the Harry Redford Tree of Knowledge, Muttabuttasaurus, Sculpture Trail, the railway connections are all strong and all very clear. I think the next level down gets a bit muddier as to what there is to offer. Museums are a strong part of that mix. Now, the journey between the towns is almost as cool as the towns. It's like between towns, you guys know this, but there's lots of little things happening. To me, that means this would be an ideal opportunity for something like an app. So someone could actually sit there with their iPhone and have local voices talking to them. So you certainly wouldn't want a polished voice over here. Not that your local voices aren't polished, but I would want real people telling me what's happening between towns. The flora, the fauna, the termite mounds, the quirky stuff. This was the site of. Talked about potential for an app. I like the big experiences and the little experiences that I find, and I think there's probably, again, an opportunity for local secrets, so that marketing stuff is just between you and me, this is the best fishing hole. So that we're not necessarily, we're giving people a feeling that we're inviting them in. You know, this is where you go for the famous pies. Potential for food and retail to become a larger part of the mix. And I think as your tourism market grows, there will be more money in the towns, there will be more businesses. And it's helping to make sure that those businesses that we bring in are the right businesses. Love your drive-ins and your picture theatres. How cool are they? And what I really like is they are things that are going to keep people in town overnight. And if I'm going to be there overnight, I'm going to need breakfast, I'm going to need dinner, I'm probably going to need somewhere to stay, or I'm going to be using your camping grounds. Gosh, and would I leave town without going for a bit of a shop? Probably not. So they're the little things that I think they're there, but they're going to give you leverage to do stuff. I think your locals, especially your businesses, add character and communication. And so convincing businesses they're a part of that tourism mix will be an important part of it. And also educating people on who does what within a community and within the next community so that you can start referring. I think there's lots of potential to create journeys, trails, whether that's a week in, whether it's a day in, because people will be coming for different lengths of stays. I think there's potential for shared marketing, not just across towns, but across attractions. There are some really excellent retailers in the area. I love the fact that they're innovative, they are doing different things. There's a couple of retailers that would not be out of place in Cap City. You know, they're that good, they're that innovative. So again, you get used to them, you think, oh well, that's how it's done, but there are people who are absolutely standing out. I think I said before there's lots of examples of 2-in-1. I think there's evidence that some retailers are struggling or have given up. And there's obvious signs that they are being supported by local community, which is fantastic. But I think there are people who are hurting who may not necessarily be saying that they're hurting. The visitor markets are really interesting. It's not often I go to a town and I find market segments that I've never seen before. The obvious ones are the grey nomads, you know, the ones who are travelling around Australia. My theory is they're travelling around Australia because they don't actually know how to back the van. They can only go in one direction. And there are lots and lots of anecdotal evidence of these guys. We know traditional grey nomads are usually on pension or government funded. They do not have access to a lot of funds. They will spend, but on stuff that they want and they have to justify. But we're also seeing a new market coming through. And I think that's a little different. I don't know whether you're seeing a lot of it yet, and they're called the wanderers. These tend to be, people trialling their retirement. So they would be in their 50s, usually on an extended break. They might have taken long service leave. They've spent on the big van. They are so they're well connected, they're using the internet a lot, they do a lot of online searching, they're spending money, they even spend on accommodation. So a little bit like the family market that Peter was talking about, I think these are emerging markets we need to differentiate between. It's really easy to look at anyone with grey hair and go, they've got no money, no point in me selling them anything, without actually testing it a bit and finding out where that ceiling is. Sure, there are some that don't have the money, but we know that only 9% of shoppers are price focused. So you're only going to lose 9% of people because you weren't cheap enough. That means there's a hell of a lot of people out there who aren't price sensitive. That 9% figure normally shocks people. They normally think it's a lot more. My theory is price shoppers whinge a hell of a lot more than anybody else, so we tend to think there's more of them. So don't pitch your business at the whingers. Long stay visitors, I love the fact that people stay for a long period of time. Family market we've talked about. Special interest. So bird watchers, obviously. Geocaches is the one I've never heard of before. So it's a whole new market for me. They sound a bit wacky, but who knows? Let's explore them and find out what they will spend money on. And then we've got the agate and the fossil hunters as well, which is another group that I'd not particularly heard of before. So let's do some research. Let's explore and see how we can make money out of these businesses. So what I've given you is a run through of kind of what I'm doing, but you can do it alongside me. I'm really interested in your feedback. Keep in mind this is just the first phase. With the report I'm going to be going into a little more depth. By the way, I do not mention individual businesses in any of these reports. If I do want to mention you, I will ring you and ask permission. And it is usually to say, this is a business that is doing it well. So it's about actually building business confidence and actually recognising people who are doing things well. Just to finish up, this landed on my Facebook page yesterday. Has anybody seen it? So I think between now and when I'm back, Let's make someone jig. You know, it's all about keeping our small business community active. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to communicate with me, my email address is on here, so you can email direct. My phone number is also on my website, so that's www.lindahailey.com.au. I am away for a month from the 12th of January, but after that, if you want to email me, ring me, I don't mind, ring for a whinge. I can't, by the way, I'm not part of council, and I'm not the parking fairy, so I can't change the parking regulations, but I will help with individual businesses wherever I can. Thank you very much indeed.